All right, we are in the home stretch. These last two episodes, I believe, are going to be mainly just whiteboard content, honestly. If you don't like whiteboard content, totally understand. You're kind of here for the practical stuff, and I get it. That's why I've been trying to keep this course as practical as humanly possible. But sometimes you've got to talk about theory. We've talked about theory in the past in the lead up to the practical content, but the next two episodes of theory aren't going to lead up to any kind of practical content, and here's why. They are very, very target specific. And in this case, it doesn't lend itself well to creating a practical application. So this lends itself well to creating large scale, very efficient, and very well built kind of tools to approach a very specific target in a very specific way. In the past, we have built specific scrapers and spiders to kind of tackle, relatively small scale tasks. We're talking about enterprise level stuff that I would implement some of these more advanced and intermediate topics with. So I didn't want to spend just a ton of time developing that out because this course is already sitting at like 12 hours, 10 hours of raw footage. So I didn't want to just spend a ton of time building out a full like enterprise scale scraper or spider. It's not good for the course. So instead, we're going to talk about the theory, and I'm going to explain it in a way that hopefully you can apply to your own large-scale spider or scraper jobs. Speaking of jobs, let's talk about jobs. So jobs, the jobs that we all know and love, the ones that, we can't live with and we can't live without, they are made up of a central kind of role. So you've got your role and you've got your subtasks. So those might be going to meetings, those might be developing a very specific thing, they might be helping new people on the team get onboarded, but you've got these specific subtasks. And this kind of method of organizing tasks and roles and subtasks is actually fairly useful for spiders and scrapers. And here's how I like to think of it. So you've got a spider, and like we talked about a couple episodes ago, your spider is going to be very good at content discovery. I'm just going to draw a horrible looking spider with, this time it's going to have 4 legs, I think. Oh. So as I said before, your spider is going to be very, very good at automated content discovery. And 8 legs on a spider, I hope. There you go. So your spider is going to be good at discovering content. So content discovery. And your scrapers are more going to be geared towards pulling down very specific content that you've already discovered. So you can actually pair these two things in a fairly efficient way by having a spider basically crawl your front page. Let's use Reddit as an example. So you've got your home page, it's full of links, and your spider is going to pull all of those links off of the front page and pull out useful pieces of information. So it's going to pull out a post, and that post is going to have comments. Ooh, 3 M's in comments apparently. Comments, and that post and those comments are going to have users. So it's going to pull all of these things out, and it's not just super worried about pulling out, for example, the post text or the comment text or pulling the user's profile. It's just pulling all of the stuff and storing the links. And what it can do is it can create a job object. So job object. And let's just say that job's object has a type, and we're going to call it post. So this job's type is post. It is going to basically correspond to this right here. So this post is also related to comments, and it's related to users. So it's also going to have a URL, and that's going to be this big long string, and then it's going to have associated users. Well, no, actually, so it's going to have a type and a post. So that is one job. Then there's going to be another job. And that is going to be a user. S-E-R. Well, that's its type. So it's going to be of type user. And it's going to have a URL. And then we're going to keep creating these jobs. The spider, it's not worried about pulling the text down. It's not worried about anything like that. Its only job is to discover these objects. And then you're going to have a scraper. That is then, so this is going to be related to the user. Then you're going to have a scraper that is going to go through all of these jobs, and it's going to actually process them. So for users, it might go through and say, okay, we've got a user with a URL. We're going to visit that URL, and we're going to get the username, the post history, the comment history, maybe the age of the profile, things like that. And it's going to actually process that information. And here you can actually see opportunities. So for like post history and comment history, it can then go in and create new jobs with posts. So type post, and then all of the stuff that goes with it. And then it might have comments. So type comment. And then all of the stuff that goes with it. And all of these jobs are going to be constantly added to this queue. And your spider is going to be adding one, perhaps your scraper is going to be adding them, and you're going to have a constantly running, constantly growing queue. But you're going to store it in a database. If you store it within memory, then you're really going to start using up a ton of memory. That's really not what you want to do. It might be a little bit faster depending on how your architecture is set up, but these job queues can grow huge, like hundreds and hundreds of thousands of entries within this job queue, especially if your scraper takes a little while to run or you don't want to overwhelm the site with requests, so you have a relatively lengthy kind of wait period. So the whole idea of jobs is building up this queue, and we've got our queue of several jobs. And we'll call this the job queue for clarity. So you've got job, job, job. And I'll put the type here. So we're going to say a post, another post, a user, let's say comment, a user, a post, and so on. So then it keeps going. So you've got this constantly growing queue. So you've got a spider whose only job is to add to that queue, and his sole purpose is making the queue grow. He's not going to actually process any of this stuff. He is just adding. And then you'll have your scraper, which I guess I'll draw a spatula for a scraper. That tells you anything about my skills in cooking. So you've got a scraper. And honestly, I've built it either way. I've built scrapers and spiders that pull from the queue and process it exclusively. And I've built scrapers that pull from and add to the queue. Honestly, scrapers are more than likely going to pull from and process the queue, and they're going to add to the queue, because as you process these, especially like user profiles is a really good example. As you process a user profile, that user profile might have, so you've got your user, and you've got your username, you've got the user's age, but you might have a list of posts that they've made. And if you've got that list, you might as well draw from that list and say, hey, here's a bunch of extra URLs to posts. Let's go ahead and add those to the queue. So that's just a secondary place where you can discover new information to add to the queue that you can then process later with the exact same scraper. So that honestly, I would not say that scrapers in this case are just going to process information. They're also going to add to the queue as well. So as the scraper is adding to and subtracting from the queue, and the spider is adding to and subtracting from the queue, obviously you've got your database, and your database is only your database is also going to hold this queue right here. So you're going to have a queue table basically within the database, but it's also going to hold the actual data that the scraper processes. So that is basically going to be a write-only relationship to the actual data part of the database, not the queue, but the part that actually holds the data. So that's typically how you would lay it out. And the way this scraper is going to work is the scraper is basically going to read in the type of job on the queue. And it's going to say, okay, this is a post. With a post, we are going to visit the URL, and we have a certain amount of things and a certain kind of data format that we're looking to fill out in order to fill out that database. So maybe we're looking for a title of the post, we're looking for links within the post, we're looking for comments that we can then add to the queue to process, or maybe we can process them directly. So if you can process them directly, then you won't have this comment type. You're just going to process the comments directly on the post. But that's not necessarily always the case. I actually like to break out, in cases where I'm scraping social media sites or forums, I like to break out comment processing on its own, just so I can go ahead and very quickly archive a post, archive what's in that post, archive the user that made the post and the date and all of that fun stuff, and then I will process the comments later on, because typically I want to make sure that I have that post archived, because that's the most important atomic piece of information that I'll want to scrape. So you'll be gathering all of this, this stuff, maybe likes or upvotes. And that is basically the template that you will use for any kind of post type job. So the templates are going to be built based on the type. So then you'll have a user profile job, and you'll want to pull username and the age, and then we'll add all of their posts to the queue and their comments to the queue and all of that fun stuff. So these templates are based on the job's type. So that is your job object, and you've got a type, post. And that's going to be right here. So it's going to use this type within the job object itself, which is stored within a database, in a database queue. And it is going to use that type in order to decide what template to process that job on. And then, obviously, every time you process a job, you're going to remove it from the queue. Otherwise, your queue is going to get massive, and you're going to constantly be reprocessing the same pages. So that's queues in a nutshell, and I've kind of explained it from the perspective of a social media site, because that's, I guess, the easiest way to explain it. But we can also do it based on our stock data example. So if you've got your job queue, and let's say every single, let's say every hour. So every 1 hour, we're going to read from a file. Read. Then we're going to fill up the queue. Fill queue. And we're going to process the queue. So these jobs are going to be based on the ticker. So let's say AAPL, and we're going to pull the price and delta here. And we're not really interested in the volume. Let's say we're pulling let's say Tesla, TSLA, and we're interested in the price and the volume. And let's have one more, so Microsoft, and we're interested in the price, and that's it. So our templates, all they're worried about is the ticker and what kind of data we're looking for. So if we're not worried about the volume on a particular ticker, then we're not going to get that. We're not going to spend processing power trying to get that. If we're not worried about the delta on a specific ticker, then we're not going to worry about the processing power to do that. That doesn't really matter if you're just pulling, if you're just pulling 3 tickers. It doesn't really matter. The processing time to gather information, you might as well just go ahead and gather all of it. If you're gathering hundreds of them, and if you're doing that very, very frequently, and if you really, really care about the time that it takes for each scrape, then yeah, you're probably going to want to delineate what information you're actually looking for, especially if it takes one extra request to gather that information. So if I've got my main page, and if I want the volume, so I've got the price, and I've got, let's say, the delta. So delta is traditionally just shown as a triangle. But in order to get the volume, I've got to make one other request to a different page. Then I may not want to take the time to make that request, especially if I've got a wait period here, because this could take, a couple seconds. So let's say 3 seconds. So if I'm not worried about this volume at all, like with Apple here and with Microsoft here, then I can save 3 seconds on those requests just by ignoring the volume. That can be very, very valuable depending on how long, what your latency is to gather information from each page, what your processing time is to pull information out of that page. So these queues can be super useful because you can decide, hey, I'm only interested in certain information. So I'm going to create these jobs, and within those jobs, I'm going to delineate between which information I want from which ticker. And this queue is going to be something that's constantly filled up. So basically what you can do is every hour, so we've actually got it up here already. So every hour we're filling up the queue. And then we've got a constant queue watcher. So a watcher that every 5 minutes it checks the queue and it processes everything in it. And processes. So that can be super valuable because you can have a queue that basically can be empty, it can be full, and it doesn't really matter because you've got this watcher who is watching every 5 minutes, is going to check the queue, see if there are any jobs left on the queue, and it's going to process those jobs if they're there. And you can even have one watcher that has several different templates. So you've got a watcher that is looking for stock price tickers, and it's also looking for, let's say, cryptocurrency. So you might have a job that is of type ticker, and it's got the data, let's say volume and price. And the ticker is Apple. So that is one type of job. So here we're dealing with job types again. Then you've got another job that is type crypto. And the currency is, let's say, BTC. And then you've got a bunch of other stuff down here that's going to tell it what to do. So one watcher can be watching for several different kinds of jobs, or you can have several different watchers all watching the same queue looking for different kinds of jobs. Basically, this queue kind of relationship, this queue and watcher relationship, can be a very common way to keep a 24/7 running type of scraping or spidering algorithm. And it can be super useful, especially if you've got something like a spider that is constantly adding to this queue, and you've got a watcher that's constantly watching the queue to add stuff to your database, to pull from the jobs, all of that, it can be an incredibly cool and efficient relationship to build out, especially if you start building in multi-threading here. So if you've got, you've got a maximum batch number of, let's say, 5 threads. Well, your queue fills up with, 45 jobs. Now you can create, batches out of these jobs, and those batches can be of size 5, and you can queue up a thread for every single job and start processing it very, very, very quickly. And each thread could be processing a completely different kind of job. You might have one, thread that is dealing with a crypto job, and another thread that's dealing with a ticker job or a stock job. So you can build out very, very intelligent watcher queue relationships there that process things very, very fast using multi-threading and using a lot of other, more advanced topics. We're actually going to talk in the next episode or the next video about prioritized queues and prioritized job queues, and we'll talk a little bit about that. It's not adding a ton on top of this, but depending on your application, it actually can be super useful to build in a priority algorithm into your job queues. But that was jobs and queues, and I've used this very, very extensively in large-scale projects, but like I said, I could have spent the time building out a very specific, very niche type of implementation of this, but I think it's best to understand the kind of ideology and philosophy behind it, and then, understand that on a deep enough level to apply it to your own projects. So I didn't want to spend all of that time building out a very targeted niche thing and completely miss the underlying philosophy of it. So thank you so much. Our next video is likely to be the last one in this section, aside from probably a conclusion, like wrap-up type of thing. And then this section is the last section, aside from the call to action in section 6 of the whole course. So we are really getting to the down to the wire here. Very excited. Thank you so much for watching. And like I've said before, course reviews help a ton. So let me know what I did wrong. YouTube always lets me know what I do wrong. So I hope Udemy does the exact same thing, and I can really improve the course through that. Thank you so much. Take it easy, and I'll see you in the next video.